Hello, and welcome to Ask an Archaeologist. I'm Paul Duncan McGarity.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Ask an Archaeologist with me, Paul Duncan McGarity. This is another interview episode, and it was recorded on International Women's Day on the 8th of March, and quite aptly we had Amy Atkins, who is a very good friend of mine and has a few bits and bobs to say about women working in and around commercial archaeological sites, and specifically on building sites, an area that was traditionally dominated by men and is now slowly changing and coming into the let's say it's coming into the 20th century, and we'll see how we develop it from there. What can I say? Again, thanks for everyone who's been listening. I've got a question off Twitter that I'm going to answer for you on the podcast now. This one was from... give me a quick second to make sure that I've got the name right. Otherwise, this is one of those embarrassing moments where you mispronounce their names. I also got a shout out in an Irish podcast where they discuss various parts of the constitutional law. But I know for a fact that I will mispronounce the title of that podcast. Obviously, me being a little bit of an egotist, as soon as I found out that there was a mention of this fair periodical, shall we call it periodical? Yeah, why not? I went immediately over and I started listening to a couple of the episodes there, and I put a tweet up with a link to their Twitter account as well. And it's the name of it is I'm going to go with Motherfoclair, and it's spelt Motherfocloir. I've given a couple of episodes a listen now, and it's obviously it's very different sort of topics to what we discuss here on Ask an Archaeologist. But it's really interesting, and the presenters are all really fun, so I would fully recommend going over there and giving them a listen if you get an opportunity. They only one of the presenters that actually listened to Ask an Archaeologist, and when you do hear the one that mentions us, it's Amy says that I've been listening to this podcast about archaeology, and I have not heard an audience go quite so dead since the time that I performed at a Christmas gig at a race course, and just watched 300 bemused faces as I tried to tell them jokes about archaeology. Whilst they were enjoying their turkey dinners. It's one of those things that I should wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, but what you quickly discover over 10 years is that whilst it hurts a lot at the beginning of talking out in front of people, once you've died quite so completely, nothing is as bad again. It's one of those things that I try and, various colleagues of mine, it fascinates me that there's people who go out on and do presentations at various conferences and everything like that. And, you see a lot of people and they're doing the reading from notes, looking straight down at the computer. And I don't know what it is. It's sort of like a defense mechanism, a fear thing. I know a lot of people get into archaeology because they're fascinated by humans, but mostly because they don't understand how they work in real life. And so it's kind of like, can I work them out from first principles? But I think, there's various organisations like the History Show Off and Science Show Off who are helping people to overcome that fear of public speaking, and I would fully recommend anyone who wants to improve how they perform at conferences and things like that to go and have a look at getting on sort of like a public speaking course or an improv comedy course. Go down to an open mic night and try and tell a joke. I guarantee you will not fear a conference ever again. Once you've been judged by people who are essentially, you've walked on stage and gone, I think I'm funny, and their looks in their eyes are like, we will judge that. You will be fine with live peer reviews and questions that don't have a question mark at the end of it, and everything else that comes with a conference. Right, I've enough waffle. This question comes from Gareth Blunden on Twitter, and he asked, what would you be buried with to make life easy or hard for future archaeologists? So we might as well do the easy one first. I would say that I would get sort of like a brief biography of myself. Things like eye colour, hair colour, what I did for a living, medical history regarding fractures and various ailments. As I'm dead, I'm guessing cause of death would probably be quite useful. All the things that they can use my skeleton as something to understand if there's any sort of markers of what occurred to me in life on my skeleton. That would be probably useful, help people test hypotheses. I would have it written in 3 languages, and I would have it carved into slate so that it survives the rigours of being buried with me. To make it hard, I would be buried head first, with my backside pointing directly up, and a trumpet popped between the cheeks, because that would be one of the most peculiar things that they were. First of all, the best thing is they'd find the trumpet first and think, ooh, there seems to be some sort of musical instrument. Oh my God, what happened here? Was he some sort of jazz terrorist? This is horrifying. So yes, it would be slate for the easy one and bum trumpet for the hard one. I genuinely cannot think of any better way of introducing Amy Atkins to the podcast than the words bum trumpet. She's a very good friend of mine. She's going to talk about some of the sort of the business side of things and the contract side of archaeology. It is a really interesting podcast, and she goes into a little bit of detail about what people can do on their CVs when they're applying for a job in commercial archaeology to make them more sort of like employable, more desirable to an employer. So I think if you are looking to get into archaeology, this is probably quite an interesting podcast for you. If you've got any questions, like Gareth did, you can send them over on Twitter. Please, you've been absolutely superb at passing this podcast around. I can tell because my listener numbers are going up and up with every episode. So thank you very, very much for that. Keep doing it. If you want to stick a review on what is it, Apple or whatever, or Podbean or anything like that you're listening on, it can't hurt. So if you don't want to, just keep listening. Keep sending in questions and. Just keep being really lovely. You're all really nice. I haven't had any problems at all, and I'm not surprised. But it's just nice to be reinforced of how awesome you all are. So, yeah, there's my 5-star review. You can use that on any posters or conference notes that you need. 5 stars, awesome books. Yeah, thanks everyone, and enjoy this interview with Amy Atkins. Until next time, bye.
One of our normal conversations, but
recorded. In which case, it will be nothing like one of our normal conversations.
I sincerely hope not.
So you might as well introduce yourself to the people who are listening. What is it you do, and who generally are you day to day?
Who are you?
Who are you?
Who am I? I am Amy.
Hello.
Hi. I'm fairly young, I guess, for the archaeological...
Yeah.
In the archaeological sense. Both in terms of people who, I guess, work in the field and also...
Yeah. Just generally. Yeah.
As a frame of reference.
Yeah. You're just one of those people who constantly doesn't get my references to 90s pop culture
No.
and looks at me like, hey, old man, why aren't you dead yet?
Yeah, we have things in the office that are BAA, before Amy Atkins, which is like, oh, we dug this site in the early 80s. It was BAA. You won't understand.
But I love the idea that people won't understand things that happened before them.
Yeah, quite.
Yeah, because if that were the case, that would make our entire industry absolutely nonsense. The Romans, the what? The Romans. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
So what do I do? That's a very good question. I would say I'm more on the business side of archaeology.
Right.
So I work in an office.
Oh.
I know. And I have my own desk with my own computer, but I'm very proud.
I'm not your family. You don't have to explain yourself.
I basically manage the work programme of quite a big archaeological unit.
Yeah.
And I assign staff to projects.
Yeah. So you're the person, if I'm getting this right, there's a bunch of people who will talk to clients, get jobs, win contracts for archaeological sites, and then they turn to you and your department and say, logistically, how do we put people here?
Exactly. So I have a work programme that's got maybe 150 projects on it, minimum.
Right.
And, you sort of have to look at how many people you've got in your team.
Yeah.
Archaeologists, supervisors, all the other specialisms and things, and sort of, assigned projects.
Okay, fair enough. So you've taken quite I'd say, circuitous route to finding yourself there. So you have a background in archaeology.
I do.
You do, yes.
I do.
So what do you, if someone asks you what you do at like a house party, what do you...
I just tell them I'm an archaeologist.
You tell them you're an archaeologist.
Because if you say, I work for a commercial archaeological company, I'm not actually out in the field working
they've switched off. They're looking for the rum already.
And if you go the other way, if you go, I'm in an operations-based role and logistics and I'm a resource manager.
Yeah.
They go, oh, okay, and you're like, for an archaeology company, they're like, oh, wow, so you're an archaeologist. So it's just easier to say
that you're an archaeologist. But you are, you
I kind of consider myself an archaeologist.
Yeah.
I don't work first-hand with archaeological material, but I am surrounded by archaeologists. The work that I'm talking about with people is about archaeology.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's good.
I don't have to justify myself.
No, you don't. But it's interesting to see the route into it. So what was sort of like the first thing that got you interested in the idea of working in archaeology?
I can only really remember, and I know that's such a cliche, wanting to be an archaeologist, other than wanting to be an astronaut at one point.
Yeah.
It was astronaut or archaeologist.
Being a dinosaur.
Yeah, exactly. Kermit the Frog.
Yeah. You wanted to be Kermit the Frog?
I think
You're far too tall.
Just as sort of like ganglion.
I can actually see that. You're just for anyone who is listening, Amy is about 6 foot. 6 foot.
Very ganglion.
Mostly made of arms.
Yeah.
So imagine that also going, it's time for the Muppet Show!
Yeah, and people call me wacky waving inflatable Amy because those things in like car parking lots. Yeah.
Were you clumsy?
So clumsy.
Right.
The very few times that I have been on an excavation, like a research excavation, one of the times I was doing up my coat and I was very intently looking at my zip and did not notice the edge of the trench. And just fell face first into it.
Oh my goodness, that's impressive on lots of different levels.
So
are you in any way responsible for safety?
I am, in fact. I recently attended a 3-day course on
so that feels
managing
like it's
safely.
Kind of like, I've done these things so you don't have to.
Yeah, quite.
Yeah, so you just always remember it. But were you sort of encouraged in your interests?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I would say my parents both got interested in history, my grandparents were, so my family very much encouraged it.
Yeah.
And my parents always, we'd go on holidays to places that were archaeologically interesting, like Greece or
Yeah.
Egypt was the big one that stands out for me. And that's
When
what really,
did you go to Egypt?
I can't remember now, when I was maybe 14. But it's
Wow.
it was at that stage when I was like, okay, can I realistically do archaeology? Or is that, when you start to become all like cynical and
At
angsty.
14? Wow. This is
Teenage
why
years
you're
were
a
hard,
pro
man.
now.
This is why nothing phases me. I hit it early.
She was 14 and you were already like an existentialist French philosopher. Life. What is life?
Is archaeology a real option?
But why is now?
But no, it was my trip to Egypt really that cemented it for
Yeah.
me. And I later got a tattoo of an ankh on my arm just to, really hammer it home when I was 18 on my 18th
18th
birthday.
birthday. And that was it. Was you walked in there and you went, actually, this is because of archaeology,
This is
not because
actually
of.
really meaningful. The symbol, it's a lovely symbol and it means a lot of lovely things.
Yeah, it does.
But yeah, I was like branding myself as an archaeologist before I'd even become one.
What did you see when you went to Egypt? Whereabouts were you?
I remember something so we did like a cruise down the Nile, which
Nice.
was a really fantastic way of seeing everything. And it's such a shame what's happened to Egypt since, because that was quite a while ago.
Yeah.
That tourism has just sort of plummeted because it's probably the best place I've ever been. It's amazing. Everyone's really friendly, amazing stuff to see. I don't work for the Egypt Tourism Board. I'm not.
Yeah, we've not
this
covered
podcast
which
is sponsored
company
by-
you're on the commercial side of. Which is the commercial side of the Egyptian government.
Yeah. But no, I remember some of the most amazing sites where there's one, which is the Temple of Philae. I might be butchering the pronunciation of that.
Yeah.
But I remember this so clearly that there's this amazing Egyptian temple with, I remember really clearly seeing Roman graffiti on it.
That's cool.
And that was the moment that I was like, that's really cool. And it got me. And everyone else was like, oh yeah, it's just Roman graffiti. I'm like, but that's old graffiti on something even older. And no one else seemed to be really fussed. And we had a tour guide, and I remember I bugged the hell out of him because I was just endlessly wanting to find out more about it.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided that's what I wanted to do.
Were you always going to do archaeology? Was that like I know you said you always wanted to do it, but was that like going to be the career of choice?
Yes, probably. I didn't ever envisage that I would be in this sort of role.
No.
My thing that I always thought I was going to do is that I was going to do my degree, do my master's, do my PhD, be a lecturer.
Yeah.
That was the
That was
path
the
that I
route.
set out from a worryingly early age that I knew I wanted to do.
This was similarly sort of like...
regimented. And that was the plan all the way up through my master's until I finished my master's, and I thought, actually, I don't know if that's for me anymore.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd do something different, and that's when I went to be a building material specialist.
Right. That was it. Where did you study your undergraduate and masters?
I did both of them at Reading,
Right.
University of Reading.
So you did Silchester.
I did, and that was actually one of the big draw factors to Reading for me.
Now, for anyone who doesn't know what Silchester is, can you explain it?
Silchester is it's a research excavation that's run by the University of Reading, but it's more than that. It's a field school as well.
Right.
I also work for this podcast is also sponsored by the University of Reading. No, it's an amazing field school. It gives people a really good introduction to what our field archaeology is. And the woman who ran it was this really amazing woman called Amanda Clark, who just very much cared about the students getting a real idea of what field archaeology was. And it taught you the real basics.
Yeah.
But it was amazing because it's a Roman town.
Did it set you up? Do you think it fully set you up ready for a life in commercial archaeology? No,
and I think that's the pitfall, is that a lot of people that I went to Silchester with, or not that I went with, but that I know went to Silchester, I think perhaps came out with a bit of a...
an idea that they had all of the skills that they needed.
Yeah, and that they knew that was what commercial archaeology was like, when the worlds are so polar opposite.
Right.
Both with their pros
it was
and
basically
cons.
digging skills, but it was taking out some of the,
in a different
pressure
bubble.
elements.
Absolutely. So it was an amazing introduction to, this is how you use this is how you take a level, this is how you excavate this sort of feature.
Yeah. You need those practical skills before you get started.
Really good foundation.
But then how those are put into place.
There's so much to build upon that.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest things because part of my job is also to recruit field archaeologists. I oversee all of that and bring them into the team. One of the things I see so often is that people sort of equate field school experience, which is fantastic and people should absolutely do this voluntary experience to get some understanding, but they sort of write in their statements that they are a fully proficient archaeologist, ready for, anything that commercial can throw at them. And that's a sort of, not dangerous mindset, but...
Well, surely though, like, a lot of those that are coming out of university, they're just graduates of...
Some of them, yeah. And,
That's surely a little bit of being 21.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure some of it is that.
Because there's a reason time travel doesn't exist. It's nothing to do with the physics. It's because if we all went back in time, we would slap our younger selves.
Yes. And I know that when I wrote my application, I first of all started with, I've always had a passion for archaeology.
Oh, you had a passion for archaeology?
I had a passion for archaeology, which you see in 99.9% of applications. Seems that a lot of people who are in archaeology have always had a passion for archaeology.
Passionate, very passionate.
Very passionate woman.
Would it make any impact on you if someone was like, I could take or leave archaeology?
There was somebody that wrote an application and they said, I've never really been interested in anything until I saw this job advert.
Oh, that's really sweet.
Which is really sweet, but a bit like, I've never been interested in anything.
Fair enough. But, so it's one of those jobs that attracts people who, you can look at it two ways. Either really, really love it and do it for the love of it, or aren't very imaginative on CVs.
No, I don't think that's true. I think it's safe to say everybody that's in our commercial archaeology, in archaeology full stop, does it because they love it.
Yeah.
I think that's evident in so many ways.
Yeah.
I think something that's quite tricky for people to understand is the difference between having been on a voluntary research excavation and a commercial excavation.
If you had to just say the top three differences between, just because I know there's so many different ones.
I think number one for me is
shock people.
Working on an active construction site.
Yeah.
I think so many people forget that. So when I tell people I'm an archaeologist, number one thing, actually two main things that people say. One, oh, so you like dinosaurs? No. And the second one is like, oh, like Time Team. And we won't go into that. Yeah. But obviously, commercial archaeology is very different from Time Team.
Yeah.
And I think people just don't have this concept that, archaeologists are actually quite often out there in hard hats, working with other contractors, working near machinery, directing plant, And so I've seen some people when they first step out onto a construction site and they look like terrified little, like rabbit in headlights.
Are you talking more about sort of in a city?
Yeah,
sites?
That's definitely urban. But even if you're in a field, there's still contractors in the welfare with you. There's still, you're still often.
When you say contractors, are we talking? You mean the builders, the plumbers, the electricians? Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm just saying it's not. So voluntary excavations, research excavations are quite often, I think of it as like a little bubble.
Yeah.
You're surrounded with all your mates and other people who absolutely love what you do.
Archaeologists are going to be pretty much the only people on site.
Absolutely. There's something so different about walking onto a site where sometimes you're not really wanted to be there.
Sometimes.
I think that's, if we're being frank.
I've been the only archaeologist on sites, like watching briefs, that thing where you stand and you watch a machine try to dig away. And I've been the only one with 7 or 8 builders around me. And it's a totally different atmosphere. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I have the utmost respect for our supervisors and any supervisor on an archaeological excavation or evaluation or watching brief where you watch them excavate to make sure they're not damaging any archaeology.
Yeah.
Because the ability to walk onto a construction site and own the construction site, sort of.
You have to be able to, particularly in things like those where you've got a set period of time to dig, you have to run that site because you have that time and you have to be the one in charge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is quite apt that we're recording this on International Women's Day, because I'm just going to slide that in there.
Oh no, she's not going to slide that one in there, because this one's one of the behind the curtains thing where, I'd say 5 hours ago, you came up to me and went, oh, we could mention it's International Women's Day.
No, it just came to me. It's
such a natural conversationalist.
Have I mentioned that it's the 8th of March 2019 and it's International Women's Day?
Yes.
I have a lot of respect for the women that I work with for, working in the construction industry, which is a lot better now than it used to be. But traditionally it was a boys' game.
It's still in a transitional state.
Absolutely.
In some areas.
And on some sites, I've seen that they're doing a lot of really good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've also heard, supervisors come back and be like, that guy was really, awful.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I work for a company that's actually very good about not accepting any harassment or anything like that. But it does take a certain amount of, confidence, ability.
It takes lots of different aspects. It's not
Yes.
one thing. You have to be sure that of yourself. You've got to be sure of what you're doing. You've got to know that you've got backup behind you.
Yeah.
It's not just confidence, it's a whole system that...
I just think, you're up against it more as a woman on a construction site on your own, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'd love to agree with you, but I've never lived that.
It's hard for you to say.
It's very difficult for me to say, My experience of sites have generally been someone goes, so what football team do you support? And I go, I don't follow football. And then they don't speak to me anymore.
You asked me what one of the other things that's different.
Yeah, I said top three. But
Top three. I think another one would be just pace. So I think something that, this grinds my gears, I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to get going.
Yanks my crack.
So
this skins my badger. Why does that my next one?
I don't know. I think that's a little worrying, Paul. So I remember being on this. I used to do some community outreach, and I remember this Swiss banker came up to me and he was like, "What's the point of archaeology?"
Yeah.
There is a point to me saying this. He was like, all you do is you get in the way of building developments and programs and you hold everything up and you cost us all money.
Right.
And blood level was
You
boiling.
did the cartoon thing with the steam out the ears.
And I think that just absolutely demonstrates and typifies sometimes if the people that do know about archaeology being involved in the construction industry, it's tends to be in a very negative way. The reality is, archaeologists, particularly in urban excavations, because there's so many different contractors involved in demolishing a building, putting it back.
It's a complex system of work.
Archaeologists get quite often the tiniest of windows in which to do their work, by whatever means necessary. If it means you have to put an extra 10 archaeologists on.
So you tend to have to overstaff things in those instances.
No, I wouldn't say overstaff. I think sometimes, the project manager will come up with, this is what we need to get this job done in, let's say, 10 weeks.
Yeah.
And then for whatever happens on site, maybe things get held up, suddenly that window gets reduced to 8 weeks. I think there's a lot of people in the world that think that we still just stay on site for 10 weeks and everything else
you
just
still
gets
have
shunted
an
back.
end date.
Yeah.
Because they've got lorries with concrete.
Or I think people tend to just think, the archaeologist, it takes as long as it takes, and they sort of, they go in and they hold everything up. Actually, archaeology is such a carefully programmed in part of the development.
Right.
But sometimes it's the thing that gets squeezed.
Right.
And so that makes my job quite interesting because
then you've got to juggle the numbers.
Sometimes at short notice, but also we don't really get any say as to when our involvement happens because it's programmed in.
So they say, here's the contract, we'd like you to do the work and you can do it in June. Good luck.
It's a bit like that, and that's sometimes quite a lot of notice. Sometimes it will be like, the start date is the 8th of April.
Right.
And I could look at the schedule and be like, I'm actually, quite chocker that week.
Yeah,
We've actually already got a lot of demands on our
If 6 or 7 people all say,
that's when it
we
has to be
start on
done.
the 8th of April, that's when...
And then for whatever reason on site, it might slip by 2 weeks. Oh, suddenly, actually now I haven't got that many in that week.
Right.
And I think...
Oh, I see what you mean. So, the way... maybe they don't get the site set up in time. They have to, clear buildings.
Delays that are not their fault. I imagine quite often the time it's not their fault.
Yeah, but something happens with the programme outside of the archaeology that means it's not ready for them to have the archaeologists on site.
Yes, so that impacts our programme. It makes programming really difficult.
And all of the people that you've earmarked for starting on this one now have to be...
Absolutely.
That sounds like juggling.
Yeah. And the other thing is that, and I think this is quite an industry-wide problem, because we get very little say in when things happen, it means that you end up with peaks and troughs in the work for people.
Yeah.
And this is one of the biggest problems in archaeology, and it's not an easy one to solve,
No, because of the nature of the sort of the short-term nature of
Absolutely.
the actual windows.
You get sometimes very little notice. Things can bunch up together where you suddenly need 50 people.
Yeah.
And then 3 months later, for some reason, because you get no say in when these projects happen, before you know it, you suddenly have work for 10 people.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that companies in archaeology need to think about, how we, if we can, level that out.
Are there any ways that you could identify now that would possibly help in making it more of a sort of like a consistent level of work?
I'm afraid I don't have that answer.
So you know there's a problem.
Yeah, I know there's a problem because I experience it constantly. So I've been doing this job for 3 years now, and I've seen ups and downs like nothing else. And sometimes, it's for a couple of weeks, and you can manage being short on staff for a couple of weeks, but sometimes it looks like it's going to go on for months. It's hard. There's not a huge amount that I can do about it because I don't get to say when we do something. Sometimes project managers can try and not push back, but can sort of say, actually,
this would be the best time.
Capacity, yeah. And some clients are very good at saying, when would you have capacity to do this? But obviously the thing is, even if I say that we have capacity in April, because that's what it looks like this morning, next week, 3 projects might have slipped, and actually April's now really bad.
Yeah.
But that project's been commissioned.
So the numbers that you're having to manage are people and who have home lives and need to be aware that they're going to be employed and that where they're going to be employed as well, because they're not just locally based as well.
No. And, previously, and a lot of companies have to do away jobs where they've won work that isn't actually near the home office. And that's quite a challenge, I think, for archaeologists as well, because it does interrupt your home life.
Yeah. I mean, it can make archaeologists quite itinerant, I think. Kind of, you get a nomadic group who are quite nomadic and move from away job to away job.
And there are some people that I think it works for. So I've known archaeologists who have spent 6 months on a project where their accommodation's been paid for 7 days a week and they get subsistence, so their entire salary is going in their pocket. For them, that's cushy. I know other archaeologists where away work is not something that they can really do. Again, it's one of those things that comes with part of the industry.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's an easy solution. Much as I wish I did, I don't really have.
But it's worth raising and thinking about.
It's worth raising and it's worth talking about. And there are a lot of groups of people who are having these sort of conversations, but also these are also conversations these are problems that have been going on for a very long time.
Do you think it's something that field archaeologists are aware of, or is this something that's being considered more in a kind of from the logistical point of view, from the management side of things?
Are they aware of,
like,
oh, you mean like the quick changing?
The weather changes. Like, obviously it's going to be very irritating and all that sort of stuff, but do they take it as like, that's just part of the course?
So this is quite interesting. This is one of the, again, a really big problem. I'm just a problem raiser, I'm not a problem solver. It's interesting because I'm in it as a manager, but because I spend all my time talking to archaeologists and working with them, I feel like I'm in quite a unique sort of observer
You've
position.
got that fulcrum point.
I think another big issue is the sort of divide between office and field, or at least a perceived divide. So I think people in offices that are working, so like project managers, management operations, those sort of things, don't see that there's that much of a divide between the field team who are out there doing, field archaeology. But I know that there is the other way round. And so I think there's quite often this sort of sense that there's not a conspiracy. And I understand why they feel that way, because they feel quite out of the loop. And I think perhaps sometimes they think that if managers say, look, this is what the schedule looked like last month, but this month it's completely changed.
Yeah.
I've heard archaeologists sort of say, but you must have known about it. And I've sort of said, we really didn't.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of office divide contributes to that, because
they almost act as two teams,
But in reality, they shouldn't.
No.
And in reality, I'm not sure that they do completely, but I can completely see why it feels that way.
Yeah.
You know, when you're out in the cold and all weather, working really
at
hard.
the core of it.
Absolutely. And then you hear that so-and-so in the office, you know, I don't know, there's no work for people next week, so you're going to have to, you know, be found odd jobs or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, they must have known that was coming. Like, why couldn't they have sent me there? That's the other one I get, is people tend to think there's this big conspiracy with deployment in where I send people.
So
it'll be like,
they think of you like a puppet master.
yeah,
like...
and really, guys, really, there's like... I'm really not looking at that. Like, so-and-so that I sent there happened to live closer than you.
Yeah, 60% of them are not that.
But again, I think I'm sure there are things we could do, and that's one thing that I'm sure we could change in lots of companies, is to bring the field team more, involve them more in the company.
Yeah. So it's a communications thing.
Yes,
really.
absolutely. Involve them more. Involve them more in the output that you're doing, I think, as well. You know, showcase the archaeologists.
Yeah, give them a chance to talk to the public and meet people and talk
Absolutely.
about it. Because they've clearly all got a passion for archaeology.
As I know they do, because they've written it down. No, but they're very knowledgeable people. They're very interesting people. They're very interested people in what they're talking about.
They're, you know, by definition, most of them are university graduates.
Yeah, and but
not
also,
all of them.
Not all of them, but, you know, there are some people I know that have spent 30 years in the field, never went to university, and they're some of the most fascinating people that I know.
Yeah. University life, man.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's the thing, is that the archaeologists, I think, sometimes think that I plan things.
What was your master's in?
I did a research master's because I had this plan of doing a PhD. So it was completely self-guided. I didn't have any contact hours.
Oh, that's madness.
I know, it was madness, but I loved it. I'm the sort of person that, I'm just super organised, it just appealed to me.
Yeah. And what did you end up researching?
So I always focus
the archaeology of the internet, my shopping history.
The problems in archaeology today. No.
None of the solutions. In conclusion, work it out yourselves.
I always focused on Roman archaeology. And it's weird because I was always interested in Egyptian archaeology. I always wanted to do Egyptology. Didn't get into UCM. Not bitter about it.
I'll put in a word.
Yeah, it's fine.
Not this one.
Totally fine.
What year did you go to uni? Start year?
2011?
Boom!
It seems like a long time ago though. Anyway, so I focused on Roman archaeology, and in my undergraduate dissertation I looked at water fountains and Herculaneum. It was fascinating. Tried to wrangle a field trip out there to do some very important research.
Very important research.
I was told it wasn't that important. That I couldn't justify what I could see on Google Maps.
Yeah.
But my research master's dissertation I loved it. So I was having a cup of tea with the person who I wanted to supervise my dissertation. I was like, I just can't think of anything. And he was like, well, I was having a cup of tea with the Duke of Wellington the other day, and he said that he's got these fascinating Roman columns in his conservatory by the swimming pool, and he'd love for somebody to take a look at them. And I'd always wanted to focus on building material and urban design and Roman architecture. That was my thing. So I thought, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I ended up going to the Duke of Wellington's estate near Reading, and recording these columns that had never really been recorded, and some of them were owned by Napoleon, and then confiscated by the Duke of Wellington, which was fascinating. Right. And I traced them all back to a building in Naples. I really loved doing that one.
That's very cool. So you were basically saying, this is the building you nicked this one from?
No, I did not say that. Because I was sponsored by them. I did do a bit of a discussion about antiquarianism and collectionism, and each of the agendas behind collecting.
Yeah. So why didn't you go on to the PhD then? If you had such a good time with your masters.
Part of it was at the time it felt like I just needed a bit of a break.
Right.
I think I underestimated how intensive a master's can be, especially one where there are no lectures. It's all just big research paper after big research paper. And partly also, I just had the sense that it wasn't just wasn't for me anymore.
Yeah.
I can't put my finger on why. Wasn't the lifestyle for me anymore.
It wasn't the lifestyle. And so you decided the research thing didn't tick with you, but you decided that the building materials would be the route that you went down.
Because I was still interested in research, but I was also interested in maybe potentially doing it in a more commercial environment. So I got a job as a building material specialist. So I was a trainee.
Yeah.
So I was learning how to record and interpret material from all different periods.
Yeah.
Building material from London. And it was fascinating. So I was looking at Roman wall plaster. I was looking at wattle and daubs, and a lot of
Do you want to tell everyone
bricks.
the thing that you really want to tell them? Come on. You're doing a lovely corporate job of saying how much you enjoy it.
I know, I really did love it.
Yeah. Go on.
The thing I love even more than the fact that I got the job is the fact that it would transpire later that you also applied for the job.
Yes.
And years later, you...
Well, I told you what I was, let's call it unprofessionally told, was the reason why I was told, I'm afraid you haven't got the position. And remember, at this time, I was unemployed.
I would say was I.
Yeah.
That helps.
Yeah, but I was like older, so it was sadder.
I was living back with my mum and dad.
I was told that they decided to go with someone who had, a sort of a better personality for the job.
What can I say?
Boo.
Your job is literally to get people to like you.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so
in
amusing
both
to
my
me.
chosen and paid professions, I go out trying to get strangers to enjoy the thing I'm saying, and yet for a half hour
They didn't like you.
They did not care for my work. I was really enthusiastic about the Flemish floor tiles.
Were you? Oh yeah, because that was the test, wasn't it?
Because do you know what it was, right? So we got told to research Flemish floor tiles
And they gave us a
beforehand.
paper.
And they gave us a paper, we had to write about it, and then there was a tray of finds, and we went through it and we had to discuss and say what we could kind of say
And there
about
was that
it.
really nuts molting tile. Which is basically like a square tile
The
that's got
honeycomb kind of
loads
thing.
of holes in it, and it's involved in the molting process so that all the
Yes.
bits fall to the bottom.
Yeah.
And all I could go was a bit of a kiln, and they were like,
Yeah. I got like a vent for some heat, and they were like, So apparently they were
better personality,
and some sort
better
of
at spotting weird ceramic objects.
I think a vent for some heat is not bad from kiln. It's practically the same thing. But the last one was obviously this Flemish floor tile. And I went, I did. And then my brain just clicked and I went, it's a Flemish floor! I just shouted it at his face. I think that might be when I lost it.
That's quite funny.
And I was too excited. And do you know what it was that I remembered?
What?
It was the little nail hole in the corner from when they were fixing them for the drying.
I remember that.
Oh yeah, that has stuck with me, despite not having to use it.
Going back to something we spoke earlier, though, it later transpired that something to do with Silchester had actually helped me get the job. So I was very fortunate that at Silchester I sort of excavated my own little area with other people.
Yeah.
I wasn't trusted with archaeology on my own.
No, God forbid.
But it was a part of a colonnade, a tile set of columns.
Yeah.
And I essentially then had the ability to write that up as one of my research papers in my master's.
Oh, cool.
And that was seeing that through was like that was really useful and good for me. And I was later told that was one of the reasons why I got the job.
Yeah.
So it's not just that I was nicer and funnier and
better
than you. It was also because I'd had this really good opportunity.
And you don't know what's going. So, if you were getting someone who is applying to be part of a commercial unit, what kind of ways can they make themselves appear, for want of a better term, more employable?
So, first of all, I would say it's absolutely okay not to have any commercial experience. People sort of can often get trapped in this cycle where it's like, must have commercial experience, but you can't get any. It's okay not to have commercial experience, but if you don't, then really make sure to emphasise any other skills you have. So they might be archaeological from research digs, But it might also be, demonstrating that you're a really hard worker.
Yeah.
That you've got a really good attitude, that you really want to learn, that you've always had a passion for archaeology. But, all those sorts of things. If you've done data entry, even if it's not archaeological, mention it. Like, I think the biggest thing people tend to do is they just sell themselves short and they just say, they try to make a huge thing out of the fact that they've been on these research digs and it's formed them into this fully fledged archaeologist.
Yeah.
It would be much better if they put their effort into saying, okay, I attended these research digs, they're really useful, it was on this. But, I've also got all these other skills that make me a really employable person.
Mm-hmm.
If you have got a bit of commercial experience, I would say talk about some of the projects that you've worked on. You don't have to name them, but you could say, site type, period, those sort of things. And if you have any archaeological specialisms, then big them up. Because
when you say specialisms, do you mean just those that you've studied or areas of interest?
Yeah. So I'm also thinking, if you've done some surveying using GPS, talk about it. If you even had some health and safety training that's a bit unusual, talk about it. I had an application recently from someone who was a glass specialist. That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
If you've got a lot of experience working with prehistoric flint and you know a bit about it, or timbers, archaeological units are really interesting. And probably all employers are, if you're comparing two candidates, the one that might not have quite as much experience in terms of years, but has a whole load of other skills that they can bring to the table.
Yeah.
That's the person that you want. And if they've got a really good attitude, one of the other things I always say is, try to show, it sounds silly, people always forget that archaeologists work outside.
Yes.
If you can show that you have worked outside or, done prolonged heavy work, that's so reassuring for an employer. I had someone who applied who didn't have a huge amount of experience, but was a tree surgeon, and also was a landscaper once, whatever. And you're like,
so they're used to the rigours, potentially. Because it gets cold.
Yeah.
It gets wet.
It does, and it's hard work.
Yeah.
I think people underestimate that because maybe they've seen things like Time Team where it's gentle brushing.
I mean, this is just specifically you're talking about excavating.
Yes,
because there are other things that people can do.
Of course. The only people that I tend to recruit are...
those are the ones you You were talking that very narrow channel.
That was very narrow. But I think some of the other things I've said about, making the most of any other skills you have, applies to any job, not just archaeological.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, I've got 2 more questions for you, and then you're free to go.
Okay.
Right. First of all,
yes.
Sight cat or sight dog?
Sight dog.
Why?
Because they're super, super friendly.
Yeah.
Dogs objectively cheer everyone up. That's what you need on site.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And number 2.
Yes.
You work in the heritage industry, right?
Yes.
How do you want to be remembered?
I don't know. That's a really difficult question.
Well, whilst I explained that when I asked that question, all of the lights in the building were in.
No, I tried to hide it in my voice.
You were great, but I just really like making sure people are fully aware that I just asked that question and then was plunged into darkness.
I know. It's a bit like suddenly hosting a seance.
Yeah. So
and we'll find out how you're remembered.
You've been dead for 20 years.
How would I like to be remembered? I don't know. Do you know what would be amazing if it's archaeological? Are you talking about boring archaeological?
However you want it to be.
Oh, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that.
You haven't got an answer?
I haven't got an answer to that.
All right, then.
Just forget me.
Just forget me?
No. I'd like to... So, I'd like to go really far in a business setting. Yeah. So... Once I stopped being a building material specialist, I moved into this role that I'm in now and found that actually I had a real aptitude for business and making business decisions. Businesswoman. And so that's what I'd like to go really far in.
Yeah.
If that's in archaeology, then great. If not...
So be it.
What a note to end on. And that's not even saying how I want to be remembered.
No, that was amazing. It was like, I'm not going to die. I've got too much
I should be timeless.
business.
I've got business to attend to. I'd like to be that super tall CEO
Cool, man.
Nailing it.
Yeah. Absolutely nailing it. In a non-specific business.
Look at that lanky woman in a pantsuit.
She's knocking everything over. She is surprisingly clumsy. Amy, is there anything you'd like to plug or anything like that?
I think I've done plenty of.
I
think all my sponsors will be very
the country
happy.
of Egypt.
University of Reading. The Duke of Wellington.
Yep. All people who really needed the publicity. Amy, thank you very much for talking to me.
You're very welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Ask an Archaeologist podcast with me, Paul Duncan McGarity. The music you were listening to was by From the Ashes. Check them out on Bandcamp. It was produced by me, Paul Duncan McGarity. You can follow me on Twitter at AskAnArch, or you can send an email at askanarch@gmail.com. But most importantly, if you've enjoyed yourself and you think you have a friend who might be interested in the podcast, please tell them about it. Write a review, put up a star rating, let people know that we're here. It's incredibly helpful and much appreciated. Once again, thank you to everyone who has asked an Ark. Bye-bye.